Mother's Day was supposed to be filled with flowers, hugs, and love. Instead, my daughter handed me a pink card and insisted I read it out loud in front of everyone. I opened it, smiling at the little doodles from my grandkids, expecting sweet words. But what came next sliced through me like a knife. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." The room burst into laughter, while I stood frozen, my heart shattering into pieces. And in that single cruel moment, I realized everything had changed forever. My life, my family, and the way I would choose to move forward. I remember walking up the path to my daughter's house that Sunday morning with a smile on my face and a bouquet of fresh tulips in my arms. It was Mother's Day, the one day of the year that is supposed to honor women like me, mothers who gave their lives to raise children. The sun was pouring through the windows when I stepped into Lauren's living room, wearing my favorite green dress, the one that always made me feel elegant. My grandchildren ran to me, their arms flung wide, shouting, "Grandma Ellie!" Their hugs were warm, their giggles pure, and for that moment my heart swelled with joy. But then I saw Adam, my son-in-law, standing stiff in the corner. He barely offered me more than a quick nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give to a stranger in passing. And Lauren, my only daughter, walked out of the kitchen with a smile that looked polite but hollow, as if it were painted on her face. "Mom, so glad you could make it," she said, her voice flat under the thin layer of cheer. "We have a special surprise for you." I sat on the sofa, trying to steady myself. My grandchildren settled at my feet, wide-eyed with excitement. I thought maybe they had drawn pictures for me or baked cookies, or written a silly poem to make me laugh. My heart was open, vulnerable, expecting love. That's when Lauren pulled a pink card from her purse and handed it to me. "It's from all of us, Mom," she said. "Read it out loud so everyone can hear." My hands trembled as I slid the card from its envelope. On the cover were bright little flowers, clearly sketched by my grandchildren. How sweet, I thought, my chest softening. I began to read in a clear voice. "Roses are red, violets are blue." My voice cracked. The next line hit me like a fist in the chest. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." For 3 endless seconds, the room went silent. My mind raced, trying to process whether my eyes had tricked me. But then, Adam broke the silence with a harsh laugh, loud and cruel. Lauren covered her mouth as if embarrassed, but I could see the corners of her lips curling into laughter too. And because the children followed the example of their parents, they giggled, not knowing what was funny, only sensing that the adults wanted them to. "Did you see your face, Mom?" Lauren gasped between laughs. "Oh my God, Adam, you should have taken a picture." The words cut me deeper than the card. Tears filled my eyes, spilling down my cheeks. My hand shook so hard that the card slipped and fluttered to the floor. I felt naked, stripped of dignity, humiliated by the very people who should have loved me most. Adam bent down and picked up the card, smirking as he held it between his fingers. "Come on, Grace," he said, his tone mocking. "It was just a joke. You've always been too dramatic." Lauren added, "Don't take it so seriously, Mom. We just thought it'd be funny. Lighten up." But there wasn't a single note of remorse in her voice. No apology. No attempt to comfort me. Just a dismissal of my pain, as if it were nothing more than a tantrum from a child. Then Adam cleared his throat, shifting his weight awkwardly. "But you know," he said, "there's some truth in it. You've been, well, a little too present lately." My heart lurched. "Too present?" I whispered. Lauren leaned forward, her tone now edged with something sharper. "Mom, maybe it's time to think about other options. There are really nice senior living communities now. Places where people your age can feel comfortable, surrounded by others like them." The words senior living rang in my head like a death sentence. I stared at my daughter, my flesh and blood, the baby I once nursed and swore to protect, now suggesting I be shipped away like worn-out furniture. "But I thought," my voice cracked into a whisper, "I thought I was here to celebrate Mother's Day with you." Adam interrupted in a condescending tone. "And you are, Mom. But let's be realistic. You're not young anymore. You need special care, and we have our own lives to live." I looked at my grandchildren. The oldest, little Ava, came over and took my hand. "Grandma, why are you crying?" she asked, her innocent eyes wide with confusion. Before I could answer, Lauren tugged her back. "Come here, honey. Grandma's fine. She's just being sentimental." That was the breaking point. I felt more alone in that room, surrounded by family, than I had ever felt in my entire life. My chest ached, my legs trembled as I slowly stood. I should just go," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "Okay, Mom," Lauren replied, not even bothering to get up. "We'll call you later." I walked to the door, each step heavy, each breath shallow. I held my chin high, clinging to what little dignity I had left, but inside, everything had shattered. What was supposed to be a day of love and honor had turned into the worst humiliation of my 74 years. That night, in the silence of my empty house, I cried until no more tears would come. But something shifted deep inside me. The pain had awakened a strength I had buried for decades. I realized that if my family could treat me as a burden, then it was time to show them who I really was. When I got home that night, I sat in my old armchair and stared at the silence around me. The humiliation from that pink card was still fresh, but beneath the pain, something stronger stirred, an undeniable urge to remember how I had gotten here. How could the daughter I gave everything to, the daughter who once clung to my skirts, now laugh at my tears? I closed my eyes, and the memories came like waves. I was 29 when Lauren's father walked out. One morning, he was simply gone, leaving nothing but a scribbled note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this life. I'm sorry." No goodbye kiss for his 3-year-old daughter, no explanation, just absence. That night, I held Lauren as she sobbed into my chest, her tiny fists gripping my blouse. "Where's Daddy?" she cried. I whispered, "Daddy had to go far away, my love." Inside, I made a silent promise. She would never go without anything, no matter the cost to me. I kept that promise for decades. I worked double shifts at the textile mill, my hands calloused from endless nights sewing uniforms. I remember the ache in my back, the sting of the fabric dust in my lungs, and the pitiful paychecks that somehow had to cover everything. But every extra penny, every nickel saved, went into a jar with one purpose: Lauren's future. When she was 17, she told me she wanted to become a nurse. Her eyes lit up when she spoke about helping people, about wearing the uniform with pride. But college tuition was impossible for us. I had no savings, no family support. The only thing of value I had was my mother's jewelry, a set of gold bangles she had left me before she died. I sold them without hesitation. The jeweler gave me a fraction of what they were worth, but it was enough for Lauren's first semester. "Mom, are you sure?" she asked, tears glistening in her eyes as I handed over the enrollment papers. I smiled, hiding the hollow in my chest. "Your education is more important than anything I own." For 5 years while she studied, I worked weekends cleaning office buildings. I would come home with aching legs and cracked knuckles, but when I saw her bent over her textbooks at the kitchen table, it was all worth it. The day she graduated, she hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would break. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. And in that moment, I believed she truly saw the sacrifices I had made. When she met Adam, I welcomed him with open arms. He seemed polite, hardworking, eager to build a future with her. When they decided to marry, I paid half the wedding costs, $12,000 I had saved over many years. "Mom, it's too much," Lauren said when I handed her the check. "Nonsense," I replied, tears stinging my eyes. "It's the most important day of your life. You deserve it." A few years later, when they bought their first home, I gave them $25,000 for the down payment. It was everything I had tucked away, but seeing them step across the threshold of that little house filled me with pride. I told myself it was worth it, because they were building the life I had once dreamed of. Then came the grandchildren, 2 beautiful children who became the light of my life. When Lauren returned to work after maternity leave, I stepped in. Every morning for 3 years, I walked 6 blocks to their house before sunrise. I made their breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, bathed them, read them bedtime stories. By the time Lauren and Adam came home from work, the children were fed, the house was clean, and the laundry folded. Lauren would smile and say, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom. You're an angel." But angels, it seems, eventually become invisible. Slowly, gratitude turned into expectation. My opinions about the children were dismissed as interference. Once, when I suggested the youngest see a pediatrician for a persistent cough, Adam snapped, "Grace, are the parents here, or are you?" His words silenced me. From then on, whenever I spoke up, there were sighs, eye rolls, and sharp reminders to stay in my lane. And yet, I kept helping. I kept giving. I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that patience would be rewarded with kindness. But instead, the requests grew bolder. 2 years ago, when Adam lost his job, I began sending them $500 a month to help cover the mortgage. "Just until Adam finds something," Lauren promised. He found a new job 6 months later, but the money transfers never stopped. They kept receiving it as though it were their right. When the kids needed laptops for school, I paid $2,000. When Lauren's car broke down, I handed them $4,000. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I contributed $8,000. Little by little, I became the silent provider, always there to solve their problems, but no longer included in their joys. The real wound came when I realized I was being left out on purpose. A year ago, Lauren threw a birthday dinner for Adam. I discovered it only because Ava mentioned it by accident. "Why didn't you invite me?" I asked over the phone. "Oh, Mom," Lauren replied casually. "It was just a small thing. You'd have been bored." But later, scrolling through social media, I saw the photos, 20 smiling faces, Adam's entire family gathered around the table. Everyone was there except me. That night, I cried silently, telling myself it must have been an oversight. But oversights became routine. They forgot my birthday. They canceled lunches. They grew irritated when I stopped by unannounced. And then, 3 months ago, I overheard Adam's phone call on their back porch. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone. She's getting really dependent." "No, she's not sick, but you know how they get at that age." "Yeah, we're looking at options to move her somewhere more proper." I froze behind the door, my heart pounding. He spoke of me as if I were a piece of old furniture cluttering their home. I had given my whole life, my labor, my money, my love, and now I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. That was the night I stopped seeing myself as powerless. Because what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that I was not the burden. I was the backbone. And I was about to remind them exactly who I was. The years that followed were not defined by one dramatic betrayal, but by countless small cuts, the kind that bleed you slowly until you're hollow inside. At first, I told myself these moments didn't matter. That families are imperfect, and maybe I was expecting too much. But each slight left its mark, carving deep lines into my heart until I barely recognized the life I was living. I remember my grandson's 8th birthday. I arrived early like I always did, hoping to help decorate, to hang balloons, to set the table. Adam opened the door, his brow furrowed. "Grace, the party doesn't start until 3, he said sharply. "I thought I could help with the preparations," I replied with a smile, clutching a bag of streamers. "We don't need any help. Lauren has everything under control." Behind him, I saw Linda, Adam's mother, already inside, stringing up decorations with the children. She had been invited to help. I had not. I stood there frozen, feeling the sting of being deliberately excluded. "I can wait outside until 3, I whispered. "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Lauren called from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "You can stay, but don't get in the kitchen. You always get confused with recipes." Confused with recipes. Me, the woman who cooked every meal for her through childhood, who filled lunchboxes with sandwiches and thermoses of soup when money was scarce. I swallowed the insult, forcing myself to sit quietly on the patio. I watched through the window as Linda baked a cake and received compliments, while I, who had paid for half the expenses of that party, was treated like an unwanted guest. When it came time to sing Happy Birthday, everyone crowded around my grandson. I hovered in the background, left out of the photos, my absence unnoticed. Later, as I discreetly gathered dirty plates, my grandson tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, why were you so quiet today?" "I was just tired, sweetheart," I lied, masking the ache in my chest. "Grandma Linda says you're too old for big parties," he said innocently. His words pierced me like daggers. Linda, only 3 years younger than me, was planting ideas in their minds, painting me as fragile, useless, outdated. But still I kept showing up. I told myself love meant patience, endurance, sacrifice. I convinced myself that next time would be different. Christmas was another wound. I spent weeks saving for gifts. A new bicycle for Ava, a tablet for Noah, perfume for Lauren, a power tool Adam had mentioned wanting. Nearly $3,000 gone, but I told myself it was worth it, that I would see their eyes light up with joy. On Christmas Eve, I walked in carrying bags of beautifully wrapped packages. The children squealed with excitement, but Lauren quickly hushed them. "Kids, put Grandma's presents under the tree with the others. We'll open them tomorrow." The next morning, my gifts disappeared into a mountain of wrapping paper. No one mentioned who gave what. The children mumbled vague thank yous, already distracted by the flood of toys. And the most painful part? I had brought a special gift for Lauren, a pearl necklace that belonged to my grandmother, passed down through 3 generations of women. I had imagined her face lighting up, the pearls resting against her collarbone, a continuation of family legacy. When she opened the box, she barely glanced inside. "It's pretty, Mom," she said flatly, not even trying it on. "But you know I don't really wear jewelry. Maybe you should save it for the kids." She handed the box back without another word. I had dreamed of that moment for months, but all I was left with was the cold weight of rejection. That night, I clutched the box in my empty house and cried until my chest ached. The final straw came 2 months later when I caught the flu. My fever reached 102. I could barely stand, could hardly drag myself to the bathroom. In desperation, I called Lauren. "Sweetheart, could you bring me something to eat? I'm so weak." Her sigh crackled through the phone. "Mom, we're busy. Adam has a big project, and I'm pulling double shifts. Can't you ask a neighbor?" "But honey, I can barely walk." "Mom, you're not a little girl anymore. You need to learn to take care of yourself. We can't come running every time you catch a cold." A cold. That's what she called it. I hung up and lay shivering in bed, my body racked with fever. For a week, I was alone. No phone calls, no visits. The only person who showed up was my 82-year-old neighbor, Dolores, who brought me soup and reminded me to take my medication. A woman I barely knew cared more about me than my own daughter. When I finally recovered, I returned to my routine as if nothing had happened. I smiled at the children, pretended I wasn't crushed, convinced myself again that love was worth enduring pain. But deep inside, I knew the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. And then came the day I found undeniable proof. One afternoon, as I helped set the table, Adam stepped onto the porch to take a call. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the window was open, and his words floated in clear as glass. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone. She's getting really dependent. No, she's not sick, but you know how they get at that age. We're looking at options, someplace proper to move her." My heart stopped. He said it so casually, as though I were a piece of old furniture cluttering their home. He didn't know I was listening. He didn't care. And what they didn't know, what neither Adam nor Lauren could have guessed, was that I had a secret of my own. A secret that would turn the tables. I was not the burden. I was the lifeline. And soon, they would learn exactly who I really was. That night, after overhearing Adam's cruel words, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my hands pressed flat against the wood. My mind replayed everything. Every sacrifice, every dismissal, every humiliation. They thought I was dependent. They thought I was nothing but an old woman draining their lives. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Because for years I had carried a truth they knew nothing about. I stood and walked to my bedroom. In the bottom drawer of my dresser was a wooden box I hadn't opened in months. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes, old bank statements, property deeds, and investment certificates. As I lifted the papers, the weight of them felt different now. They weren't just documents. They were proof of my worth, evidence that I had been the backbone all along. Decades ago, when my Aunt Lucille passed away, she left me a modest inheritance. She had no children of her own, and she trusted me to put the money to good use. I never told Lauren about it. Instead, I invested it carefully, government bonds, CDs, a few shares of stock in companies that quietly grew over time. Every statement, every dividend I tucked away untouched. I lived off my modest pension and Social Security, allowing the inheritance to build silently in the background. But that wasn't all. What my family truly didn't know, and what would shock them most, was the property. When I turned 70, I inherited a beachfront condo in Siesta Key, Florida, from my late mother's side of the family. For decades, it had been managed by a rental company, bringing in steady income deposited into an account I rarely even checked. I never flaunted it, never spent lavishly, never bragged. I lived simply, content in my little Ohio home, so they assumed I had nothing. But the truth? That condo, combined with my investments, made me worth far more than they imagined. I spread the papers across the table and did the math. In the last 5 years alone, I had given Lauren and Adam $67,000. The down payment on their home, $25,000. The wedding, $12,000. Monthly support, another $12,000. Laptops for the kids, $2,000. Car repair, $4,000. Kitchen remodel, $8,000. And countless smaller expenses that added up to at least $4,000 more. I stared at the total, my hands shaking. $67,000. Money I had poured into their lives as if it were endless. And still they laughed at me. Still they called me a burden. I leaned back, my eyes burning. For years I had allowed them to see me as weak, fragile, dependent. But I wasn't the one who depended on anyone. It was them. They depended on me, on my money, my time, my energy, my willingness to give without question. Without me, their lives would look very different. And now they were about to learn that truth. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of clarity. My sadness was shifting, hardening into something sharper. Determination. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about teaching them a lesson. It was about reclaiming myself, reminding them, and reminding me that I was not disposable. I looked again at the condo deed, the official seal stamped in bold ink. That place represented more than money. It represented freedom. A new chapter. A chance to live a life where I was not mocked, not dismissed, not treated as a burden. I thought of the card they forced me to read. You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. Those words had been meant to break me. Instead, they had woken something long asleep. I whispered into the empty room. I am not a burden. I am the one who kept you afloat. The house was silent, but inside me there was a storm. Fury, yes, but also an unexpected calm. Because now I had a plan. I would cut the strings that bound me to their disrespect. I would take back my money, my time, and my dignity. And most of all, I would take back my freedom. For decades, I had believed that being a mother meant giving until there was nothing left. But now I understood the truth. Being a mother did not mean becoming invisible. It did not mean being treated like furniture to be moved aside. It did not mean enduring cruelty disguised as jokes. No more. I carefully returned the documents to the box, but this time I didn't hide it away. I set it on the kitchen counter where I could see it every day. A reminder that I had power. A reminder that I was not what they claimed. As I turned off the lights and walked to my bedroom, a strange sense of peace washed over me. The humiliation of Mother's Day had cracked me open, but from those cracks, something new was growing. Strength, resolve, liberation. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be the beginning. Tomorrow, I would step into the bank, into the lawyer's office, into my future. Tomorrow, I would no longer be the silent provider. I would be the woman who finally took her life back. And as I drifted into sleep, I knew with absolute certainty. My family had mistaken my kindness for weakness. But they were about to see the truth. The next morning, I woke with a fire in my chest. For years I had moved through life on autopilot, bending to the will of others, giving without question. But now the fog had lifted. I wasn't going to cry over their cruelty anymore. I was going to take action. I put on my best gray suit, the one I had bought for Lauren's college graduation and barely worn since. I pinned my hair into a bun, dabbed on lipstick, and looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, the woman staring back at me wasn't fragile. She wasn't invisible. She was powerful. My first stop was the bank. When I walked into Reed & Company, the air smelled of polished wood and coffee. Thomas Reed, my financial advisor for over a decade, looked surprised to see me so early. "Mrs. Carter," he said warmly, "how can I help you today?" I set my box of documents on his desk. "I need to make changes. Big ones." He frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Are you sure? These accounts have been stable for years." "I've been stable for years, Thomas," I said firmly. "And that's the problem. It's time to take control." For the next 2 hours, we went through everything. I canceled the automatic $500 transfer that had been dripping into Lauren's account like clockwork. I closed the so-called family emergency savings account that only Lauren and Adam ever touched. I consolidated my investments into my main account, ready to use them for me, not them. "Are you certain about this?" Thomas asked again, concern softening his voice. "These are significant moves." "I'm more certain than I've ever been," I replied. "It's my money, and from now on it serves me." I left the bank lighter, as if invisible chains had fallen from my shoulders. My next stop was the office of my attorney, Harold Whitaker, an elder law specialist who had handled small matters for me in the past. When I walked in, he looked up in surprise. "Grace, what brings you here today?" I placed my will on his desk. "I need to rewrite everything." He leaned back, eyes narrowing with concern. "That's a serious decision. Is everything all right?" "Everything is better than all right," I said. "For the first time in years, I see clearly." I explained my wishes. Everything I had once set aside for Lauren and Adam would now go to a foundation supporting abandoned seniors. I established a trust for my grandchildren, but with conditions. They would only receive it when they turned 25, and only if they maintained genuine contact with me. No fake phone calls. No obligatory visits. Real love or nothing at all. Harold studied me for a long moment. "Grace, you've thought this through, haven't you?" I nodded. 74 years is long enough to learn what matters. He slid the papers across to me, and with a steady hand I signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I walked down the street to a travel agency, something I hadn't stepped into in decades. Behind the counter, a young woman greeted me with a bright smile. "Planning a vacation, ma'am?" "No," I said, my voice clear and strong. I'm planning a liberation. She blinked, unsure if she heard me right. Where to? Siesta Key, Florida. One-way ticket. And make it first class. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. When would you like to depart? This Friday. As I handed over my card, a thrill surged through me. For the first time in decades, I was doing something entirely for myself. No permission. No apologies. Just me. On my way home, I stopped at a stationery store and bought elegant letterhead, cream-colored paper with gold trim. That night, I sat at my desk, pen in hand, ready to write the words that would change everything. Letters to Lauren and Adam, not filled with anger, but with truth. Letters that would make them see what they had lost, and what I had finally reclaimed. The ink flowed steadily, my hand no longer trembling. For years, I had been silent, enduring their dismissals, their cruelty. But now, every word on the page was my voice rising, clear and unwavering. When I finished, I sealed the envelopes and placed them neatly on my coffee table. Tomorrow, I would arrange for them to be delivered during the family brunch they loved to host without me. They would open them surrounded by Adam's relatives, and for once, the truth would not be hidden. As I leaned back in my chair, a smile spread across my face. The humiliation of Mother's Day had been their cruelest gift. But in a twisted way, it had given me something invaluable: freedom. For the first time in decades, I felt alive. The morning sun spilled through my curtains as if urging me forward. The decision was already made. There was no turning back. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was action. My time in Cedar Ridge had run its course, and I was ready to step into a future that was finally mine. I started by tying up loose ends. I walked through my modest house, touching the worn furniture, the family photos on the wall. Each picture told a story. Lauren in her cap and gown, Adam awkwardly smiling on their wedding day, Ava and Noah as newborns swaddled in blankets. I didn't tear them down. I didn't throw them away. These were still my memories, even if they hurt. But I chose which ones to pack. I kept the photos where my eyes shone with pride, not the ones where I stood in the background, forgotten. Next, I collected spare keys I had once given Lauren and Adam. I slipped them into an envelope marked canceled. I called a locksmith to change the locks on every door. No more surprise visits, no more entitlement to walk into my home uninvited. This was my sanctuary, and I was reclaiming it. Then came the finances. I logged into my online accounts and froze the joint emergency fund they had always dipped into. I canceled every link to their names. No more quiet monthly transfers. No more lifeline without gratitude. As I clicked confirm, a strange calm washed over me, as if invisible strings had been snipped one by one. But the hardest task was writing the letters. The night before I had drafted the bones of them, but now, I shaped them with precision. For Lauren, I wrote with honesty. My dearest daughter, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, not gone forever, but gone from the place you've grown comfortable dismissing me. I'll be on my way to Florida, to a home you never knew existed. For decades, I gave you everything. My money, my time, my love. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as your burden. This is not punishment, Lauren. This is clarity. From now on, if you want a relationship with me, it must be built on respect, not obligation. For Adam, the tone was different, firmer, sharper. Adam, I once considered you the son I never had. I paid for your wedding, your home, your emergencies. I gave freely, not because I had to, but because I loved you. And yet, I overheard you plotting to move me like furniture that no longer fit the room. What you didn't know is that I've had the means to live independently all along. I'm done funding your comfort while you chip away at my dignity. From this day forward, you stand on your own. When the ink dried, I sealed both envelopes. But I didn't plan to mail them. No, these needed to arrive at the perfect moment. I contacted a courier service and scheduled the delivery for Saturday during one of their family brunches. I pictured it clearly. Lauren's in-laws gathered around the table, the letters landing in the middle of their laughter, the truth slicing through their assumptions like a blade. I didn't write to humiliate them. I wrote to hold up a mirror, to force them to see what they had turned me into and what I had chosen to become instead. With the letters handled, I moved on to something symbolic. I opened the closet and took out the elegant gray suitcase I had once bought but never used. It still smelled faintly of leather. I filled it with my best clothes, my documents, and the pearl necklace Lauren had dismissed. That necklace wasn't hers to reject, it was mine to cherish. And now it would travel with me into my new life. Before the afternoon ended, I walked through each room of my house one last time. The living room where I had nursed Lauren as a baby. The kitchen where I had spent countless nights cooking meals after 12-hour shifts. The hallway where Ava and Noah had once played hide-and-seek. My heart squeezed, but not with despair, with gratitude. This home had been my battlefield and my shelter. But it no longer defined me. By evening, I sat at my desk and drafted one final note, a message to myself. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are free. I folded it and tucked it into the pocket of my purse. A reminder for the journey ahead. That night, sleep came easier than it had in months. I dreamed of ocean air, of walking barefoot on white sand, of laughter that didn't sting. And when I woke the next morning, I knew Cedar Ridge was my past. Florida would be my future. When the plane touched down in Florida, I felt the weight of 74 years lift off my shoulders. As I stepped out of the airport, warm ocean air wrapped around me, carrying the faint scent of salt and sun. It wasn't just a change in scenery, it was a rebirth. A car from the property management company took me to the condo on Siesta Key. As the vehicle rolled along palm-lined streets, I pressed my hand to the window like a child seeing the world for the first time. When we arrived, I stood before a 3-bedroom beachfront condo I had only ever seen in photos. Pale stucco walls, blue shutters, a balcony that seemed to reach out toward the ocean. My heart pounded as I turned the key and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of citrus and sea. The floors gleamed with polished wood. The windows stretched wide to reveal endless waves crashing against white sand. I walked slowly from room to room, touching the counters, the railings, the cool glass of the sliding doors. For decades, this place had existed as numbers on paper, as a hidden line in my will. Now it was real, and it was mine. I placed my suitcase on the bed and unpacked carefully. For once, I wasn't setting up for someone else's comfort. I folded my dresses into drawers, hung my blouses neatly, and placed the pearl necklace, my grandmother's legacy, on the dresser. I caught my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "Welcome home." The next morning, I walked to the shoreline. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the waves humming a steady rhythm that matched the beat of my heart. For years, I had lived for others, but here, with the ocean stretched endlessly before me, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known since childhood. No one could mock me here. No one could reduce me to a burden. This was my sanctuary. But I knew peace wasn't enough. I needed purpose. I visited the local community center, a modest building with murals of dolphins and children painted on the walls. Inside, I found flyers for watercolor classes, yoga for seniors, and volunteer opportunities. I signed up for all 3. The receptionist smiled and said, "You'll fit right in, honey. Everyone here looks out for one another." Her words felt like a balm. For so long I had been surrounded by people who only took. Here, I sensed a circle of giving and receiving that was genuine. The days quickly fell into a rhythm. Mornings began with long walks on the beach, afternoons filled with painting lessons where I learned to blend blues and greens to capture the sea, evenings spent cooking meals just for me. No one else's preferences dictating my menu. I even joined a group of retirees who cooked soup for a homeless shelter every Thursday. For the first time in years, my energy went toward something that didn't drain me. It filled me. Still, even in paradise, the past has a way of reaching across miles. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Lauren's name. My heart clenched. I didn't answer. Minutes later, another call came. Then another. Finally, a voicemail. "Mom, please, we need to talk." I stared at the waves, the phone heavy in my hand. The old me would have answered immediately, desperate to keep the peace. But I was no longer that woman. I had boundaries now. I let the phone rest on the table and whispered into the night air, "You'll talk when you're ready to respect me, not before." For the first time, I felt no guilt. Only strength. As the stars spread across the Florida sky, I realized something profound. My family might never change. They might never value me the way I deserved. But here, in this new chapter, I didn't need their validation to feel whole. I had community. I had peace. I had myself. And that, I thought, was more than enough. Back in Ohio, while I was sipping tea on my Florida balcony, Saturday morning unfolded just as I had predicted. Lauren's dining table was crowded with Adam's relatives, chatter echoing through the house, plates clinking as brunch was served. And right on cue, the courier rang the bell. Lauren opened the door, surprised to find 2 envelopes with my handwriting across the front. The courier left quickly, and she carried the letters back to the table. Adam leaned over, frowning. "What's this?" "They're from Mom," Lauren said flatly, though her voice trembled. She tore hers open first, her eyes scanning the words. The laughter around the table slowly dimmed as her face paled. My words, carefully chosen, etched with truth, unraveled her composure. Her letter reminded her of everything I had given. The knight's sewing uniforms, the jewelry I sold for her tuition, the thousands I poured into her wedding, her home, her children. It told her what the Mother's Day card had revealed. That she had stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as a burden. The brunch that had begun with mimosas and pancakes turned into silence thick enough to choke on. Adam ripped open his envelope, and his smirk faded as he read. My words cut directly to him. How I once accepted him like a son, how I had bailed him out time and again, how I overheard his call to move me somewhere proper. His face reddened. His brother muttered, "What the hell, man?" while his mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For once, Adam couldn't hide behind jokes or dismissals. I wasn't there in person, but my voice filled that room louder than I ever had when standing right in front of them. My ledger of sacrifices, the $67,000, the gifts, the time, the endless labor, was laid bare. My conditions for the grandchildren's trust were spelled out in black and white. Genuine contact, respect, not obligation. If they wanted me in their lives, it had to be real. The silence broke not with Adam or Lauren, but with Ava. My sweet granddaughter slipped away from the table, found her tablet, and sent me a voice note. When I later opened it, I heard her small voice whisper, "Grandma, I miss you. Can we draw together again?" Hearing her voice brought tears to my eyes. She wasn't mocking, she wasn't dismissive. She was simply a child reaching for love. It reminded me that not all ties had been poisoned. Some were still pure, waiting to be nurtured. Back at that brunch, Lauren's relatives looked at her differently. They knew now what I had endured, what I had given. Adam's own brother said quietly, "She deserved better from you." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but whether they were from shame, regret, or anger, I'll never know. When the calls came, first 1, then 3, then 5, I let them ring. I listened to the voicemails later. Lauren's voice wavered, breaking with a mix of guilt and panic. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I didn't know. I didn't realize. Please call me back." Adam's message was harsher, laced with defensiveness. "Grace, you didn't have to humiliate us like that. You could have just talked to us." "But humiliation?" "No. Humiliation was forcing me to read a card that said, 'You're a heavy burden.' What I had done wasn't humiliation, it was truth." That evening, I stood on my balcony, listening to the waves. My phone buzzed again, and this time I answered. Silence hung for a moment before Lauren's voice cracked through. "Mom." "Yes, Lauren. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you did. I thought you'd always just be there." I took a deep breath, steady and calm. "I will always be your mother, Lauren. But I won't always be your safety net. If you want me in your life, it has to be as someone you respect, not someone you use." On the other end, I heard her sniffle. "I want that, Mom. I really do." I didn't promise her anything. I didn't rush to soothe her guilt. I simply said, "Then show me." Not with words. With actions. When the call ended, I felt no triumph, no vengeance. Just peace. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted. Not because I fought to control them, but because I finally chose to control myself. And as the waves crashed against the Florida shore, Ava's voice note played again in my mind. "Grandma, can we draw together again?" That tiny plea reminded me of why boundaries mattered. Not to punish, but to protect love where it was still alive. A week passed before I heard the knock on my condo door. The sound startled me. It was softer than I expected, hesitant, almost afraid. When I opened it, there stood Lauren. Her eyes were red, her hair tied back in a messy bun, as if she hadn't slept. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ocean wind rushed in between us, carrying the weight of decades. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked slowly through the living room, her gaze darting from the wide windows to the family photos I had chosen to bring with me. There she was in a graduation gown, in a wedding dress, holding baby Ava. She pressed her lips together, guilt flickering across her face. Finally, she turned to me. "I read your letter again. I don't know how I let things get so bad. I thought you'd always just be there, no matter how we treated you. I'm sorry." I studied her carefully. This wasn't the defiant daughter who had laughed at me during brunch. This was a woman stripped bare, finally facing herself. Still, I knew apologies were only the beginning. "Lauren," I said gently but firmly, "sorry means nothing without change. I gave you everything, money, time, love, and somehow you convinced yourself I was a burden. That card you forced me to read wasn't a joke. It was the truth you already believed. Tears welled in her eyes. I hate myself for that moment. For all the moments. I don't know how to fix it, Mom. But I want to try. I need to try. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice. Then listen carefully. If you want me back in your life, there are rules. 3 of them. First, respect. No more cruel jokes, no more dismissing my feelings. Second, honesty about money. I will not bankroll your life. If you have needs, you handle them. If you ask me for help, it must be with openness and a plan, not expectation. Third, care. Not care out of obligation, but genuine care. A phone call when I'm sick. A visit because you want to see me, not because you need something. If you can't live with those rules, then we keep our distance. Her tears spilled over as she nodded. I can do that, Mom. I want to do that. I didn't hug her right away. I let the silence sit, let her words sink into the air like an oath. Only then did I open my arms, and she collapsed against me, sobbing like the child I once rocked to sleep. For a fleeting moment, I felt the warmth of what motherhood was supposed to be. Not sacrifice without end, but love that could still heal. That evening, we sat on the balcony together. The waves shimmered under the fading sun. Lauren pulled out her phone and said, "The kids want to see you." She pressed a button, and Ava's little face filled the screen. "Grandma," she shouted, waving so hard the tablet shook. "Can we do our art day again? Please." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from pain. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking with joy. "Every week, no matter what." Noah leaned into the frame, his grin wide. "Grandma, I'll draw you a castle. You can live in it." I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. "I already live in a castle, honey," I said, gesturing at the sea behind me. "But I'll treasure yours even more." As we ended the call, Lauren turned to me. "Thank you for giving me another chance." I shook my head softly. "I'm not giving you a chance, Lauren. You're giving yourself one. The question is whether you'll use it." She nodded, her eyes steady for the first time in years. "I will." When she left that night, I stood on the balcony long after the door closed, the waves crashing steady against the shore. For the first time, I felt balance. I wasn't naive. I knew rebuilding trust would take time. There would be setbacks, maybe even disappointments. But now the rules were clear. And in that clarity, there was hope. Not every family fracture can be repaired. Some wounds cut too deep. But in my case, healing began the moment I stopped letting love mean servitude. By drawing lines, I had opened space for respect. And by demanding more, I had finally received it. The stars shimmered above me, the same stars I had once stared at in Ohio through tear-filled eyes. Only now they didn't look cold or distant. They looked like promises. Promises of mornings with paintbrushes, of children's laughter over video calls, of a life still worth living. And for the first time in decades, I whispered to myself, I am not a burden. I am the blessing. As I sit here tonight, listening to the steady crash of waves outside my Florida window, I think about everything that's happened. Mother's Day, the card, the humiliation, it was supposed to break me. But instead, it became the spark that lit a fire I thought had gone out long ago. It forced me to confront the truth I had ignored for years. People will treat you the way you allow them to. And for too long, I had allowed myself to be diminished, dismissed, and used. We teach others how to treat us, not with lectures or demands, but with boundaries. When I accepted cruelty disguised as jokes, I taught them I would endure it. When I gave money without hesitation, I taught them my pockets were endless. When I stayed silent in the face of disrespect, I taught them my voice didn't matter. But the moment I said enough, the moment I walked away, I rewrote the lesson. I am not a burden. I am not disposable. I am a woman who gave everything, and I am worthy of respect. And if my own family must learn that through loss, then so be it. Because in the end, self-respect is not something anyone can give you. It's something you decide to claim. I know many of you listening tonight have felt the sting of being taken for granted. Maybe it wasn't a cruel card, but perhaps it was a child who stopped calling, a friend who only showed up when they needed something, a partner who forgot how to appreciate you. I want you to hear me clearly. You are not invisible. You have the right to demand respect. And setting boundaries doesn't destroy love, it protects it. For me, the greatest proof of that came from Ava's voice note. Grandma, can we draw together again? That tiny voice was pure, untouched by bitterness, reminding me that love is still possible when we protect it with truth. And maybe one day, when my daughter has truly learned, we'll sit side by side not just as mother and child, but as two women who finally see each other clearly. Until then, I will continue to live. I will paint the ocean at sunrise. I will volunteer at the shelter, ladling soup with a smile. I will walk barefoot in the sand and remind myself that freedom, at 74, is not too late. In fact, it's right on time. So if you take nothing else from my story, take this: never accept being treated as less than you are. Whether you're a mother, a father, a spouse, a friend, you deserve respect. And the moment you decide you are worthy of it, the world begins to shift. Now, before we end, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been where I was, feeling invisible, dismissed, or taken for granted, leave the word boundaries in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about setting healthy lines that protect our dignity. And if my story resonated with you, don't just stop here. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter, where I'll be sharing 10 powerful steps for parents and grandparents to build financial and emotional boundaries without guilt. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Finally, share this video with someone you know who might need to hear it. A friend, a parent, even a child. Sometimes a single story can spark the courage to change a life. Because at the end of the day, that's what this journey has been about. Not revenge, not anger, but freedom. Freedom to live, freedom to be seen, freedom to be valued. And as I close this chapter tonight, I leave you with the words I now tell myself every morning. I am not a burden. I am the blessing.